Shabbat Shalom and happy Passover, Chag Sameach. This is Shabbat Pesach. We are in the midst of our Passover week, as those of you who are marking the festival with the eating of matzah know all too well. It's been all but almost a week now, and we are still playing with the themes of redemption and exodus and freedom and constraints, and we'll be speaking of some of that this evening. Our service this evening comes from our festival prayer book. I'm given to understand that if you have the flip book, if you're taking advantage of the opportunity to click the link that Olivia provides in the chat such that you can follow along in the prayer book that you've been using, and the prayer book that we again turn to tonight will take us to some different pages, a few different insertions, a blessing or two, such that we take note of our Passover holiday. In addition, we're at the time of year where we change a insertion or two in the various prayers now that we're this time of year and the agricultural seasons shift and our focus shifts as well. And so Molly will call our attention to that surely when we get there as well. Shabbat Shalom to all, a healthy reflection on Passover. On page 385 for a festival service, in preparation for lighting our candles, help us to perfect our ways of loving and caring. Inspire us to make ourselves whole so that we may honor your name and that we might create a world of justice and peace. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. And bless us and all we love and those who love us as we inaugurate Shabbat with the lighting of our candles this evening.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov.
On page 388. We remember on this day our crossing of the sea so long ago, when Miriam, Moses, and the Israelites sang this song to God. Adonai is my strength and song, who has become my deliverance. This is my God, whom I will enshrine. So too do we sing out this night in praise on this day of our redemption.
Continue with the psalm for the day, the Psalm of Shabbat. You'll notice that it's an abbreviated Kabbalat Shabbat because it's also a festival. So we're on page 390 for Mizmor Shir and Sadiq Katamar.
התמר יפרח כארז בלבנון יזכה שתולים בבית אדוני בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו עוד ינובון בשיבה דשנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד כי ישר אדוני צורי ולא עוולתה בו.
Transition with Chatzi Kaddish on page 392. Yitgadol v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalmad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael bagala bagala uv'izman kariv v'imeru
Amen.
Yehi shmi Rabba mevarach le'alam ulal me'al maya yitbarach yitbarach ve'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitodar v'yitole v'yithalal shemei d'kudisha
Barichu.
Eila min kol birchata ve'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma ve'imeru.
Amen.
Together we rise in body or spirit for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship, on page 394. Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed.
And time reverses its course, today flowing back into yesterday, like a river enclosed at its mouth. Each of us has been a slave in Egypt, soaked straw and clay with sweat, and crossed the sea dry-footed. You too, stranger, this year in fear and shame, next year in virtue and justice.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Avad olam beit Yisrael amcha v'tah Torah u'mitzvot u'kim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Page 405. Doubting is but the forefront of faith, a faith in the infinite growth of an unbounded creation. A doubting age is one of restlessness and discontent with what is current. A doubt is an idea that is still alive. To doubt that the past has uncovered all things is to express faith that many things are still to be uncovered. To doubt that we have grown to our full stature and knowledge is to express faith that we may develop into beings of such power and dignity that we cannot as yet imagine what shall be.
אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. העמידנו שומרנו לחיים.
אתה אדוני, הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו, ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל ירושלים. We celebrate Shabbat with Vishamru on page 410, followed by a quick passage about the celebration of the festivals. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל עוד היא לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת. וידבר משה את מועדי אדוני אל בני ישראל. We move ahead to the T'filah, which begins on page 468, and I physically have to turn that many pages. And once again, I invite you to rise in body or spirit. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei HaKol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
Continue with a reading on page 473. Your might, O God, renews the earth. With dewdrops of light and blessing, let the earth be illumined and blessed. With dewdrops of joy and delight, let the earth rejoice and sing out. With dewdrops of life and well-being, let the earth be revived and improved. With dewdrops of redemption, let the earth be redeemed. Livracha velo liklala, for blessing and not for curse. L'chaim velo lamavet, for life and not for death. Sova velo razon, for abundance and not wants.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. You may be seated.
One does not travel to Jerusalem, one returns. One ascends the road taken by generations, the path of longing on the way to redemption. One brings rucksacks and stuffed with memories to each mountain and each hill. In the cobbled white alleyways, one offers a blessings for memories of a past which have been renewed. One does not travel to Jerusalem, one returns. And on page 480. Our God and God of our ancestors, be mindful of your people Israel, and recall our merit for good and grace, and in loving kindness and compassion for life and peace on this festival of Pesach. Zochrenu Adonai Eloheinu bo l'tova.
Amen.
Zochrenu ufokdenu vo livracha.
Amen.
V'hoshienu vo l'chaim.
Amen.
This day remember us for well-being. Amen. This day bless us with your nearness. Amen. This day help us to a fuller life. Amen. And at page 480, we continue, or rather 482. Bestow upon us the blessings of your holy festivals, and may we so celebrate them as to be worthy of your blessing. Our God and God of our ancestors, make us holy with your mitzvot, and let your Torah be our way of life. May our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. Let your Shabbatot and holy festivals remain our heritage, and let us so celebrate them with love and favor and joy, so that all Israel, hallowing your name, may have cause to rejoice. We praise you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat, the house of Israel, and the festivals. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat, v'Yisrael, v'Hazmanim. We continue silently.
Adonai Tzuri, Adonai Tzuri,
We come now to the counting of our Omer. The Omer is the period of time between Passover and Shavuot, when traditionally we number the days from our exodus out of Egypt to our arrival at Mount Sinai, there to receive the Torah, the Ten Commandments. And we number each of the days. Today is the 6th day as we move forward from our Passover. And you may know, if you're following our emails, that we're counting the Omer by walking the Omer. Rabbi Henry is inviting everyone to join her on each morning of the Omer at, I believe it's 8 a.m. More information is there as to where that gathering takes place. Olivia will share that in the announcements, I pray. And in that way, we'll be able to make our way through these 7 weeks, 7 weeks of 7 days, 49 days of the Omer. So on page 570, if you're following along in our prayer books, we pause to count and to bless the counting of the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Our praise to you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to number our days, to count the Omer. Hayom shisha yom la'omer. Today is the 6th day of our counting the Omer. We turn now to the Mishaberach. As we pause to consider all those among us and those for whom we have love and concern, who are this day struggling, perhaps with body maladies of a physical nature and concerns of the heart, maladies of the soul. We think of all of them now. We have a list that has been collected over recent weeks. We invite you to share names that you might wish to have read aloud in the chat, or to share them where you are, and then we'll join together with Don in the Mishaberach, the text for which is on page 511. Among so many others, we are mindful of Julie Arnheim, Martha Berg, Millard Balloon, Howard Bregman, Alfred Brown and Brenda Buch, Olivia Burton, Frank Carl, Christine Danchik, Hinda Sara Batchana Perel, Sandy Davis, Paula de Reamer, Hechazan Natanya Batchaim Vachana, Debbie Duncan, Jacob Eisenfeld, Faye Fishman, Martin Gluck, Harvey Goldstein, John Gority, Marcia Gross, Pierce Haggard, Donovan Hughes, Kathy James, Naum Kaplan, Lori Kimball, Lee Kramer, Mary Lietzel, Judith Levison, Ann Mallinger, Michael and Marcus, Dorothy Pavlik, Alex Pimpanella, Lev Podorovsky, Thomas Reich, Ann Kovalan Santoni, Chava Bela Batsara, Joan Shear, John Spear, Jean Strasburger III, Jackie Student, Deborah Wolfslayer, Howard Weiss, Joan Weiss, Clodius and Maxine Willis, Doreen Zisla, check the chat now, Dave Dornberg. We're mindful as well of those injured, although I did not have the names at the time we went live on our service, of those injured in the attack on Capitol Hill this afternoon, as well as all those who are victims of such senseless, meaningless violence. We consider all of them now as we pause and share the beautiful lilting words of Mishaberach.
Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha laimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So Shabbat Shalom. I'm dancing around trying to avoid this sunbeam, which is coming through the window in my office. Over the course of a year, the sun obviously sets at a different angle in the west, and I have a western window, and that's what was coming across the screen. I want to share with you an insight that came to me this week by some writings of Rabbi David Wolpe, as well as an article that I got from the Canadian press, of all places. You may well know, surely, I'm going to assume that you do, but so that I can be reminded myself, recall that the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, references narrowness and constriction, that your tsar is your throat, and when that gets clogged, it's narrow and frustrating, right? And so Mitzrayim is coming through a very narrow passage. And so it is that our tradition is labeled Egypt, that place of constriction, that place that was known by its narrowness and its ultimately its enslavement, and that which was defined and confined, constrained for us. But Rabbi Wolpe invites us to appreciate that while in Hebrew Mitzrayim means narrow, and we think of narrowness typically as a negative trait, there are times when tighter is better. When we are held, for example. Snug is another word for narrow, he teaches, because sometimes to be confined is to feel safe, and to be released is to feel scared. So I mentioned the Canadian press because a friend of mine who's a rabbi in Vancouver shared with me an article that came from the Globe and Mail entitled, "Hugs are good for us, but when will they be safe?" It reads in part the following: "The pandemic has deprived millions of a kind of physical contact that our brains are hardwired to crave. Even as the pandemic eases, there won't be easy answers about when we can embrace again. With vaccination programs underway across the country and the return to normal edging tantalizingly closer, people are beginning to think about all the things they miss most. For many, hugging friends and family is the top of that list. Unlike travel, a night out at a restaurant, or so many of the other things we once took for granted, hugging satisfies a deeply human need for safety and affection. Hugs are something that are so primal for us as a species," says Francis Chen, a researcher at the University of British Columbia, whose work focuses on how social relationships affect our physical health. "It's just very natural for parents to be hugging their young children, so it's probably something you've associated with comfort your whole life." She pointed out that many sentiments hugs communicate comfort, affection, security, trust, longing. There's a lot of symbolism in hugs. Maybe another part of the reason we give hugs and what we associate it with is with reunions. This is interesting. The word hug comes from the Old Norse word hugga, which means to comfort. Part of the sense of comfort we get from hugs is rooted in our physiology. When we hug, pressure receptors under the skin send signals to the brain that activate the vagus nerve, the longest of all the cranial nerves. The vagus is responsible for slowing the heart rate, slowing blood pressure, and biochemically it slows the production of stress hormones. Studies have shown that hugs can trigger a wide range of psychological and physical benefits, from boosting the immune system to making people less fearful of death. No wonder we have craved them so much this past year. And so as we make our way, metaphorically, out of Mitzrayim, out of the narrow places that Egypt represents, and as we begin to emerge from quarantine cocoons, we might ask, when will people be able to hug one another? There really is no answer yet. There is clear medical threshold to determine if it is safe for people to hug, And then there's a murky social and moral threshold to determine whether we should. If you have two people who are fully vaccinated, I think it will be safe for them to hug, says one expert. But whether or not people who are fully vaccinated should hug when so many other people who are still waiting for the vaccine cannot is a much trickier question. And further, there's a risk of social stigma if two people seen hugging are believed to be flouting convention as opposed to engaging safely. The question of equity and perception enters into our discussions when we are talking about when and how to go about reopening. And so this Passover, we are a bit betwixt and between, not perhaps unlike the 19th century rabbi who taught that when the Torah teaches, as the Haggadah reminds us, that God liberated us with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, the hand of God was to take us out, but the arm was there to keep us from going back. Yes, the rabbi taught Jews wanted to return to Egypt. It was slavery, but it was safe. And now Rabbi David Wolpe counsels, we are about to be liberated from confinement in a very different sense. We too have to relearn to use our freedom wisely, to be judicious and careful and kind, from the narrowness of our homes to the wideness of our embrace of the world. The journey to being able to be together again is a slightly scary one, but also beautiful and full of promise. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. We turn back now to Aleinu on our prayer books, page 586. And if you're able and are inclined, won't you please rise?
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך hu. On page 589, let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. Page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
We come now to Kaddish. And as I prepare to read the names that we have been provided already and those of whom we are aware, I invite you once more to add any names you wish to share into the chat. We are mindful of the recent passing of Charles Battaglini, Darnell Campbell Jr., Dr. Michael Cook, Barbara Dahlberg, Dr. Ed Diamond Jr., Joan Jacobs, Kenneth Karsh, Marion Kessler, Howard Lederer, Robert Robbie Marcus, Joy F. Moss, Stacy Zissuk Robinson, Eileen Utai, Liv Zane. We add the name of the Capitol Police Officer William Evans, whose life was taken this afternoon, and we remember with Yahrzeit. Celeste Barrand, Dorothy Bortz, Rose Green, Ida Halsband, Charles Kirshner, Janet Krieger, Barnetta Lang, Betty Beals, and Harry Tabor. Are there any other names to share to be read aloud? If you're able and wish to do so, I invite you to rise as together we share the ancient words and rhythms of our Kaddish. You also might choose to unmute that we might mingle our voices and our words together. If you wish to join with me, I invite you to unmute and do so. Yitkadal,
Alvi Iskadash
Kadash,
Shmei
Shabbat,
Rabah
Amen.
Yalma
Tivrach, Yvite, Ve'amlich Malchute,
Chayecho,
Vechon Kudyomechon, Ufchaye Lechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala Bishman Kari V'ru Amen.
Yehi Shmei
Shmei Rabba Mevarach La'alam U'Lalmei Almaya,
Almei Almaya, Yitbarach,
Barach V'Yishtabach, V'Pa'ar V'Yitromam V'Yitnaseh, V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal, Shmei Dekudusha B'Richu, Ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Shvechata V'Nechemata, Damiran Ba'alma V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Mishemaya, Chayim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, V'Imru Amen. Ose Shalom B'Mromah, Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Bnei Adam, V'Imru Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Let me just say aloud as well, before we do our announcements, we remember also Judy Nathanson, Odell Nathanson, and Miriam Schaffel.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll be here for our announcements for the week to come. All of the Zoom links and everything, you can find them in your Shalomogram on Monday mornings and service information in the Friday morning email. If you're not receiving those or they're coming to you weird, anything like that, you can email me, tucker@rodefshalom.org. I'll help you get sorted out. Tomorrow morning, we join with Temple Sinai for our 7th day Passover festival service. There will also be a Yizkor portion in the service, as it is the closing service for Passover. This is at 10 a.m. Usually our service is at 10:30. Set your alarm a little early for 10 in the morning. There's no Torah study tomorrow, but there will be returning on April 10th. Topic to be decided, leader to be decided, so it's a big surprise. And as always, virtual lone egg after our services. But again, 10 a.m. tomorrow, and not the regular Zoom link. So please follow the Zoom link, which is both on the Passover website that we've been sending out, as well as the email that you got this morning. Classrooms Without Borders, documentaries, lectures, virtual tours, more. We are sponsoring this week a number of programs, including Jewish Heritage Around the World with Avi Ben-Hur. This week, Tuesday at 2 p.m., talking about French Jewry. And on Thursday at 4, Balm in Gilead, Story from the War, with Ambassador John L. Withers II and Holocaust survivor Howard Chandler. I'm always impressed at how many ambassadors Classrooms Without Borders is able to bring on board for conversations, and incredible resources to hear about these stories. The Talmud class and Christian Jewish dialogue, we would have expected them this past week, but they both pushed to next week to avoid being in Passover and Easter. So Talmud class is this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. with Rabbi Tuckman, and the Christian Jewish dialogue tracks on Thursday at noon from Redemption to Revelation, how our traditions observe the 50 days between Pesach and Easter and Shavuot, Pentecost. So what we do with the Omer, and I'm fascinated to learn what the Christian experience is, Thursday at noon. And as we mentioned earlier, we are walking the Omer with Rabbi Henry daily at 8 a.m. to 8:45, so not very long, in Frick Park The parking lot at South Braddock Ave at Biddle. Dogs are welcome. You'll see Toby, Rabbi Henry's dog. There's no necessary, you don't need to register, but if you share your email and contact, if there's any emergencies to update, we can send you a contact. If you haven't checked out the website, there's so many resources. If you haven't, if you don't need a Haggadah for a final night Seder or anything like that, if your scheduling worked out weird, maybe you need one for next year. The Passover website remains the same. And with that, I turn it over to our president, Karen Breen, for a report from the board.
Great, thank you, Olivia. And thank you to the worship team, to Rabbi Bisno, to Don McGahan, to Molly May. Thank you so much. And Olivia, thank you for the tech this evening as well. I hope that you all have been enjoying the Passover postcards that have been sent out from various groups, whether it's JJAP or Women of Rodef Shalom, or I think that's actually on the horizon. But the idea was to help in any way we can to, as our theme has said, spring forward from our narrow places. So related to that, as I mentioned in the board postcard, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk to each other. So we have a couple of town hall meetings planned, which are part of what we're calling our listening tour, on Sunday, April 11th at 4 p.m. and on Thursday, April 15th at 7:30 p.m. There will be information. It's been advertised already and will continue to do so. I apologize for my dog whimpering in the background. He seems to have spring fever, even though I walk him about 20 times a day now. He seems to not get enough of it. So rest assured, he's in good hands here. I also wanted to mention that it's not too early to be thinking about our annual meeting, which will be coming up in June 13th, Sunday at 11 a.m. And prior to that, we're going to be sending out a printed piece that includes the agenda and all kinds of information for the meeting that is in a sense kind of an annual report. So I think we all remember printed pieces fondly coming from Rodef, and we hope to do more of that as we emerge from our narrow spaces. I wanted to also put in a plug for the Walking the Omer with Rabbi Henry. She and I were talking about it. I want to assure people that if you'd like to join, it will not be strenuous. In fact, I probably will bring my dog along when I go, and he's old because we adopt senior dogs. So what I heard from Rabbi Henry is feel free to set your own pace when you show up. I just want to let you know that whoever shows up is very welcome. So thank you. With that, I hope that you have a very good and healthy end of Pesach. Shabbat Shalom. Take care.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
So we'll turn now to our Kiddush for festivals with Shabbat, which is found on page 386. Vayera vayiboker yom hashishi, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bachar banu mikol am, veromemanu mikol lashon, vekideshanu bemitzvotav, vatiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ava, Shabbatot limnucha, umoadim lesimcha, chagim uzmanim lesason. Et yom hashabbat hazeh, ve'et yom chag hamatzot hazeh, Zeman chirutenu, Mikra Kodesh, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim, B'Shabbat u'moadei kodecha, Be'ahava uvratzon, Be'simcha u'v'sason, Hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat ve'Yisrael, ve'hazmanim.
Amen l'chaim.
And of course, we make our blessing over matzah because we're in Passover. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. We can throw it open for